All right, we're going to get started tonight. We're back in Daniel tonight, and I'd like you to turn to Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. We started last week looking at 4 different rulers, and we got through about 3 of them, and so I gotta do the 4th tonight. As we get started, Daniel chapter 6. I want to walk through the different characters we've seen so far. Last week we looked at the character of Daniel. And if you remember, what did Daniel start out as we looked at him last week? One of the characters from Proverbs. What would you say? What characteristic of Proverbs did Daniel most represent starting out the narrative? He's wise. All right? And so Daniel is a character who is wise in a true godly sense. And as he goes throughout the rest of the narrative, he continues to stay wise. And so we really could say Daniel gets wise to wiser. And Daniel is a perfect example of that. I love it as you go through Daniel's narrative, and we'll come back around to this here in just a moment. Daniel is one of those characters that he is constantly pointing attention back to God. He is constantly admitting, hey, my people have sinned. We brought this on ourselves. This is God's hand. He is a godly man who constantly references God in all that he does. I'm not even going to try to spell the full name of Nebuchadnezzar. It would take up the entire board. But we've got Nebuchadnezzar. Based on what we were talking about last week, where would we say Nebuchadnezzar starts off the narrative? He's a fool, but specifically what kind of fool would you say? Okay, he's a prideful, but we'd really say Nebuchadnezzar starts out as a simple character. And why would we say Nebuchadnezzar starts out simple? He doesn't know any better. He attacks, he ambushes, he pillages, and he comes back with all this stuff, and what does he do? He just puts it in his temple, he just kind of leaves it alone. It's almost like he knows better than to further the insult, but he's at least there going, hey, I don't know who this God is, and I'm willing to kind of listen to any God that's going to be talking to me. Now you'll notice he gets lifted up in what? Pride. So he is a man who gets proud, and what does God do to him? God humbles him hard. All right? I mean, he comes along, and God, this is what you'll find. Both Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, who's the next character, they both get warned. They both get corrected. They both get straightened out. One of them responds, the other one doesn't. And that's the real difference. And we could say Nebuchadnezzar ends what? He ends wisely. He ends humble and wise. And so I wanted you to see that, and that's what we were looking at last week. We've got Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, these 2 characters who Daniel starts out wise. In fact, he starts out as, kind of one of the beautiful people, if you will. That's the way he's described in Daniel 1. But there was a whole lot of people like that. And Daniel says, I am going to do what's right. I'm going to serve the Lord. I am going to honor the authorities above me. I mean, Daniel is just this perfect example of how someone should respond. And he just, step by step, just does the right thing. And God continues to honor him for it. Then, like I said, we saw Nebuchadnezzar, who God delivered great victories to, did great things to Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar, as he learned more about God, he almost got a little bit too impressed with himself. Look at the great things I've done. Look at the Babylon I've built. And so God was like, yeah, that can't continue. And so we saw that Nebuchadnezzar quite literally spent about 7 years in insanity. And that's kind of the weirdest part of that story, if you stop and think about it, is you've got this king, and he just goes absolutely insane. His hair's growing long, his claws, he's basically got claws for fingernails. And I don't know what they did with him. I don't know if they just kind of put him out to pasture, or if they just kind of kept him in a little cage but he just basically was on his own for 7 years as this madness set in, until he finally he recognized that there was a God in heaven over all this. And we get that beautiful testimony at the end. But then we get to the guy of Belshazzar, who's the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. And as you kind of study out history, there was a king in between, but they were kind of co-regents. And so that's why the Bible just basically says, yeah, it just went from Nebuchadnezzar to Belshazzar. And so there you go. You've just got that little bit of a skip there. And he obviously starts out, really, I wouldn't say he starts out simple. What would you say? What character in Proverbs would you say he starts out? I would say he really does start out as a scorner. At most, he starts out as a fool, just generically. But what is it about him that makes him fall into the category of a scorner? He didn't learn. He didn't learn, and again, I want you to put yourself in his shoes. Here's a guy who's sitting there, and he pulls all of these trinkets out that they captured from the temple. And he's sitting there partying with them and feasting with them and just really defiling them. And again, that projection of a man's hand that shows up on the wall. Again, that's not a normal thing. I hope. I trust none of us have had that experience. I've been to some theme parks where they can simulate that with holograms now, but that's not normal stuff. This holographic. I almost did it. Isn't it funny how we just take our technology and we kind of anyway. But this hand appears and writes out a warning on the wall. I mean, God is taking his time to go to him and say, you are making a terrible life choice. This will cost you your life if you continue. Does he take it seriously? No. I mean, he freaks out. It says like the joints of his knees were loosed and his knees are knocking. He's terrified. But it doesn't lead to repentance. It doesn't lead to any sort of actual godly fear. It just leads to fear. And so what happens? He gets wiped out. And the Bible will warn us of this in Proverbs repeatedly, that the scorner's basic end is just to be destroyed. That's all that will happen with a scorner. He's gone kind of beyond the pale. And so I want you to see these three rulers. Now Daniel is the one that's going to continue. He continues throughout all of this. But then I want to introduce you to the last one. And this guy, his name is Darius. And Darius, he's Darius the Mede. And I want you to see this because in Daniel chapter 6, we get here in the end of chapter 5, it says, in that night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. And Darius, the Median, took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So this guy, he's 62 years old. And what he is he's the conqueror who kind of rolls in, takes out Babylon, and he sets up his own government. Now, Daniel, think about all that Daniel has seen in his life. He's a teenager. He's minding his own business, and his kingdom is conquered, even though the prophets warned, repent or you'll be conquered. And they didn't listen. So he's taken away to Babylon. Daniel just sets up shop. We talked about that this morning. You seek the good of Babylon, the city that you've been exiled to. And even though it was a wicked city, even though it was a wicked empire, Daniel just said, you know what? I'm going to be a light here. I'm going to be a testimony here. I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to serve the king well. And he saw really a great deliverance in the case of Nebuchadnezzar. He saw this great thing happen. But Nebuchadnezzar's revival, as it were, did not pass down to his kids, didn't pass down to his descendants, and his grandson becomes the most arrogant, destructive force ever, even though his predecessor knew better. And so think about Daniel watching all this happen. And Daniel kind of pops in and out of the story. We don't know where Daniel was. Like, he could be off on a mission. He could be, relegated to the side. We don't know. But he gets called back. He gives the warning. The warning's not heeded. And so now there's an entirely new kingdom set up. And Daniel's gotten to live through all of this chaos. Like all of that insanity. And Daniel just stays that stabilizing force the whole time. He stays strong in the chaos. We talked about this verse a few weeks ago, that he that hath no control over his own spirit is what? It is like a city that is broken down and without walls. And there's something to be said about that stabilizing force in the chaos that's just, hey, let's keep our eyes on God. We're uncertain. We don't know what's going on. Let's just hold the fort. And Daniel was that character. And you'll notice, who did people keep coming to? Daniel. Who was a leader? Daniel. Who was the prophetic voice that people actually listened to sometimes? Was Daniel. He was that stabilizing force. He wasn't melting down at every given moment. He was a city that was not broken down and had walls, if you will. And it's interesting because think about what would happen if you took over an empire. What would you immediately do to all the rulers of that empire? It'd probably eradicate them. You probably wouldn't be too keen on keeping the leadership of that previous empire. But look at Daniel. Daniel is immediately kept on board, and he is immediately promoted. So there's something about Daniel that this guy said, we can't afford to lose him. Let's keep him on board, which again, he's a Jewish captive that became a Babylonian wise man who now is working for the Median Empire. He just kind of works his way along. It's an absolute fascinating side story. But I want you to see here in Daniel chapter 6. So Darius the Mede, he's the new king. Verse 1, it says, and it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. So he's delegating authority. So he's setting up a good little system here. And it says, over these were 3 presidents. So he sets up kind of this hierarchy. And so you got all these kind of governors. And then over all the governors, you've got like these presidents. And then Daniel is like the chief of the presidents. And so Daniel somehow rises right back up to the top. He's right up in the charge of everything. And you know that now Daniel has some crosshairs on him. Daniel has got to be above reproach. Daniel's got to be just acting cream of the crop because there's a whole bunch of people jockeying for power who are looking at him as the foreigner going, we don't like you. Now, again, I would say Darius, he comes onto the scene, and again, we really are looking at him as, here is a guy who's just simple when it comes to the things of God. Like he can't even claim that he conquered Israel because Nebuchadnezzar was the one who did that. He has pretty much no connection with the God of Israel. He's just rolling in going, yeah, you're a Jew? Cool. Whatever. I mean, that Daniel is probably more Babylonian at this point. And so Darius is coming in, and he's setting up these princes, and he says, you have something about you. I want to keep you as one of my leaders. I want to keep you as my authority. And look what happens. It says, now Daniel was preferred above all the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Again, just kind of a miraculous thing if you think about how government works. And it says, then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault. Again, this is Daniel who, even though this is the nation that conquered him, he has very little loyalty. Like, he's not blood related to these people. He didn't grow up. Like, he owes them nothing. But Daniel is living that verse we looked at this morning, seek the peace of the city you get exiled to. Daniel is saying, I am going to do the best job I possibly can. He is acting wisely in all of these ways. And because of that, God says, you're going to be found in good favor. And you'll notice this happens with Daniel repeatedly. He keeps getting found in good favor. Now, look what happens. They want to find something about him that he's doing badly. They're just hounding. They're trying to find. I mean, they're going through his search history. They're going through the books in his library. They're checking all the notes. They're going through everything they can to find dirt on this guy. And they can't find anything. But what they notice is Daniel has this habit that he goes and he prays at a certain time of day, every single day, and they go, wonder if we can play the religion card here. So that's what they're about to do. They're looking at him going, we can't get him on anything official. We can't get him on anything political. We can't, I mean, this guy is not like stirring up trouble in the back alleys or doing it. Like, this guy is entirely above reproach. We can't get him. But he doesn't worship our gods. There we go. And that's where Daniel comes in. Now look what happens. It says he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So if we can pit him and his religion against the political leanings of the government, we know which side he's going to choose. We know that Daniel is one that always puts his faith first. So if we can get it that his faith and his political duties are at contrast, we know exactly what Daniel's going to do. And we know that because we've heard the stories of what he did with the food, and we heard what happened with the fiery furnace situation, and we've heard Daniel throughout the years making these choices. We got him. We got him. And you'll see this where, again, they're coming at him at the only spot they see as a weakness. which is his character. He will not compromise. Now look what happens. These men, they said, we're not going to find anything to arrange. Verse 6, then these presidents and the princes, they assembled themselves together to the king, and thus they said to him, King Darius, live forever. Now I want you to notice what is happening here. I say Darius is simple. Now, he's wise in a worldly sense. He set up a good government. He set up good leadership setup. He did all that. But I want you to show his simplicity, because what he's doing is he's giving into flattery, and he's going to assume everything's on the up and up. He's assuming that Daniel's on board. That is his weakness. Because he delegated so much, he just assumes things are being done. Because he delegates, what happens? They can come in and go, oh, king, live forever. You know we want you to live. Like, you're the best king ever. We hope that you're our king forever. Okay, and he likes to hear that. But you'll notice what they do is they come and they say, we've gotten together. We've agreed on a law that we think you should pass. Now, who was the head of all of them? Daniel. So who probably would have had to sign off on all of the decisions they were making as a group? Daniel. Now, Daniel wasn't there. And so here's this group that comes along, and they're speaking, but Darius, he's just going, oh yeah, I'm assuming Daniel's on board with this because everybody's coming and saying, we agreed to do this. He never once pauses to go, hold on, let's hear what Daniel has to say. Now, I'm going to take you back for a moment, because remember, we were talking our way through David. We said one of the weaknesses of David, specifically when he was on the run, we said David, he took people's word and he never verified whether it was right or not. He listened to the gossip. He listened to the bad-mouthing. And so you saw that with David, where you've got that servant that comes and says, oh, my master, he was just looking for a reason to get you taken down a peg. And David's like, really? Okay, well, everything he owns is yours now. And there's that whole narrative in the middle of the Absalom rebellion where David just takes a guy's word for it and just rolls with it. And you're like, David, what are you doing? But you got to understand, when you're being flattered or when you're under a great trial, those are extreme weak points that you're going to make some decisions that are probably not the best. Because that stress, you're not processing right. And what happens with Darius is he comes on the scene and they're going, king, live forever. Hey, we've been talking. We came up with a law. We think you'll love it. And we want to make sure that you just sign off on it. It's good. Don't bother double checking any of this stuff. I mean, that's really what's going on here. And so look at where Darius is weak. He didn't bother to verify any of these things. He didn't bother to let his guard go up when they started flattering him. And look what happens. They say to him, hey, we've got this. Now, king, all the presidents, the princes, the counselors, the captains, we have all consulted together to establish a royal statute. Okay, that's a lie. That's not what had happened. They did not all get together. They're just making that up. And it says, to make a law and a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into a den of lions. Now again, Darius should have been aware that something was amiss. Seems kind of weird that everybody's unified in this, and seems kind of weird that they're only going to let him pray to him. And okay, this is all very strange, but Darius it just didn't process it. He's just rolling with it because, again, all of his leaders, all of his authority figures seem to be saying this thing. He never pauses to ask, I don't know, it doesn't sound like Daniel. I don't know, it doesn't sound like something Daniel would be on board with. You said all. I mean, sure, maybe we can do it, but that doesn't sound like Daniel's okay with this. And so what he does is he believes a lie. Now again, he doesn't believe the lie out of any malice. He's not out to get Daniel. He's not out to do anything. Like, he just quite literally is just being very simple. He's just believing what he's told. But I want you to notice the weakness that we can fall into as well. The Bible says that surely oppression makes a wise man mad, and a gift destroys the heart. Why? Because hard times and a little bit of bribery can corrupt a person. And that's what we see going on here with Darius. He's a good administrator. He's a good leader. He delegates really, really well. But in this instance, they come to him with the right flattery, they come to him with the right idea, and they lie to him. And instead of just double checking and shooting off a text to Daniel to be like, hey man, Not sure you saw this one yet. We don't know where Daniel was. Maybe Daniel was out of town. Maybe Daniel was I don't know. There were times where, like, if you look at the fiery furnace, Daniel wasn't there because Daniel was probably off doing something, and that's why you don't see Daniel as part of that narrative. So Daniel probably was traveling around doing government work. He believed a lie. Now, look what happens. Because they set up this law that they say, if you pray to anyone for 30 days, we're going to cast you into a den of lions. Now, king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it may not be changed according as the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. And here's the twist. Even the king was not allowed to circumvent that law. That's the way the law was set up. If you signed that law as the king, you were locked in. There was nothing you could do about it. So he thinks Daniel's on board. He likes Daniel. He thinks everything's on the up and up, and he's like, sure, fine, you guys can pray to me. I don't care. I mean, yeah, go ahead, pray to me. Good. That's cool. I like that idea. He's simple. He's acting in the simplicity. He's not malicious. He's not a scorner. He's not going out of his way to fight the Lord. He doesn't know any better. He is quite literally ignorant of all these things. And so what happens is he goes, all right, I'm going to act like a pagan ruler. You can pray to me. Cool. Great. We all on board? He signs it. Well, look what happens. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and the window being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled on his knees and prayed 3 times a day, prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Daniel just kind of shrugs it off. He does this. Daniel has had this habit. He's made his faith known. He's made his commitment to the Lord known. And now he goes, yeah, I know God doesn't necessarily command me to do this every single day. He doesn't command me to do it 3 times a day. I mean, at least I haven't found that verse yet. If you found that verse that tells them to pray exactly as Daniel does here. But Daniel had this habit, and Daniel's saying, you know what? I'm not going to cower and go hide in a corner and pray in secret. I'm just going to do what I've always done. And if they're going to find fault with me for doing it, they're going to find fault with me for doing it. And that's what happened. So Daniel just goes and he says, I'm just going to keep doing the same thing that I've always done. And it says, and these men assembled, and they found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And so Daniel is continuing to live wisely. Daniel's continuing to live out his faith. And he just goes, I'm not going to let a law change me. I'm not going to let a law change the faith that I have. I'm not going to let the law change how I pray or to whom I pray. And again, this shouldn't come as a surprise to any of us. Like, you've seen Daniel's character all the way up to this point, and you've seen that he's not corruptible. You've seen that he's not out for greedy lucre. He's just, listen, I didn't seek this out. I'm just going to be faithful. And that's what we see. And so Daniel just keeps doing his thing. They know exactly where to find him when. They catch him in the act, and they go, there you go. We got you. Now, was he doing anything sinful? Nope. I mean, you could say this is like some sort of civil disobedience, if you will. But it's basically Daniel saying, I'm going to put my faith first. I'm going to rather obey God than man. Let it be. And that's his attitude. He's so trusting of the Lord. Now look what happens, verse 12. Now they came near and they spoke concerning to the king, concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. So he's just going, yeah, of course. Yeah, what about it? Then they answered and they said to the king, behold, Daniel, which is one of the children of the captivity of Judah. It's interesting that they have to phrase it that way. They're not saying Daniel, who's like the chief prince of all of us and the one who tells us all what to do. No, they're going, yeah, Daniel, that captive from Judah. Again, they're trying to play this up. But look what happens. That of the captivity of Judah, he regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree which thou hast signed, but he maketh petitions 3 times a day. And look what happens. Then the king, when he heard these words, I love this. He said he was sore displeased with himself. And he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored to the going down of the sun to deliver him. And so what we see is Darius, he starts changing from being simple. He hasn't quite become wise yet. But he's starting to repent. He's not quite there. He hasn't quite changed completely. But he's starting to repent because he now realizes what his decision caused. He realized my decision has now doomed a man who I have great respect for. I made a rash decision. I made a quick decision. I acted foolishly. And so what he does is, as the king who has all the law books, he starts going through all those law books going, is there any exception that I can play? Is there any legal recourse I have to get out of this? There isn't. The law was solid. The law was impervious to any doubt. He was stuck. So he repents. He's very disappointed with himself, but there's nothing he can do. All right, and I want you to see how this plays out. Okay, it says he labored to the going down of the sun to deliver him, and then these men assembled to the king and said, "Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute with the king established may be changed." Okay, so they've dropped their pretense of flattery. Now they're basically saying, keep the law, king, otherwise you're illegitimate. Keep the law. Now again, this is a bad life choice to mess with the king this way. We're about to see how this plays out for them. Because they're coming on board and they're basically saying, we got you. You're going to be forced to kill Daniel. And we're so happy about this. And let's just say, the king has a way of getting back at them. You don't do this. But again, they are so consumed with their hatred and their envy of Daniel that they are actually making some very stupid choices too. All right? Daniel, you'll know, I just want to contrast. Look at Daniel and his actions toward authority, and look at these men's actions toward authority. Daniel was very open. Daniel said, this is how I'm going to stand, and I request that I can get an exception. Can we have a plan to go into effect here? Daniel was very gentle. Daniel was very persuasive, if you will. But look at these guys. They're manipulating. They're conniving. They're pushing the king to do that. Like, okay. Completely different actions. Daniel's is driven by an honoring the Lord and blessing the nation. Theirs is, we just want to get rid of the guy ahead of us. And that's really the contrast here. Now, let's finish off this story. We all know this, okay? And it says this, the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and they cast him into the den of lions. Now, the king spake and said to Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. And so now, he is starting to sort of, he's recognizing a new authority. He's recognizing there's something about your God, Daniel. I hope he delivers you. Like your God will deliver you. And we don't know if this is said in a spirit of hope or a spirit of confidence. We're just given the words. But here he is. He's saying, Daniel, I know your God can do a thing here. I know you serve him continually, and let's see what happens. And it's a beautiful picture here. But look what happens. The king went into his palace, and he passed the night fasting. And so it really is almost, it's not so much a question anymore. Here's a guy who's saying, there's only one who can deliver Daniel now. And I'm going to do everything I can to get his attention because Daniel needs him. And here's a pagan king who's fasting and who's acknowledging the power of God and who's now looking at this, and he says, neither were instruments of music brought before him. His sleep went from him. So he's not sleeping. He's fasting. He's almost like in grief over what decision he just made. Again, he's more or less repenting in a way. But then look what happens. And it came to pass early in the morning, he went in haste unto the den of lions. So he has no choice but to kind of let things play out as they are. and look what it says. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said, O Daniel, the servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Talk about this situation that Darius, he got himself in. He stepped into this mess. It's his fault. But he repents, he makes things right, and now he is saying, this isn't some old dead God who doesn't do anything in the world anymore. This is a living God whom you serve continually. Is he going to come through for you? It's just a fascinating study of how this man's heart changes. But then I want you to note Daniel. One more time we see Daniel acting wisely. And it says, and Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. So now we've got a bit of flattery, but it's not really flattery, it's respect. Daniel is not coming with the attitude of the previous administrators who were trying to butter up the king. Here's a guy who quite literally just got thrown into a den of lions by this man. And instead of cursing him out, instead of insulting him, he goes, hey, there's no bad blood between us. I mean, you got yourself in a bad spot. This is all your fault, but things are good between us. You're forgiven, if you will. And I love this because what is Daniel doing? He's saying, it's not about you and me, king. It's about the glory of God. It's not about the beef between us or between me and those other politicians. None of that matters. It's between me and the Lord. And look what he does. He directs, just like Daniel does, repeatedly. He directs all the glory back to God. And it says, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel and hath shut the lion's mouth, and they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, I have done no hurt. So he basically pleads his innocence one more time, which everybody knew, but he's just saying that. But look what happened. And the king was exceeding glad for him, and commanded they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Now, just in case, and I don't know if this is why this next part is included, but it's more of the vengeance aspect. But just in case you were, concerned that maybe the lions just weren't hungry that day. Because I know, all of us read that story and automatically go, well, it wasn't a hungry lion. They were the peaceful lion, the cuddly ones. Okay, look what happens to the men who decided to do this in the first place. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people, verse 24. And the king commanded, and he brought those men which had accused Daniel, and cast them into the den of lions. And they brought disaster on their own families too. Because the king is not messing around. He just got put into an embarrassing situation. So we still kind of look at Darius and we go, okay, you're not perfect. You're not the most great example that we should follow. Okay, you made some good strides, but look at the absolute scorched earth method he takes care of all of those other leaders. He chucks all of them and their whole families in, and it says the lions destroyed them before they even hit the bottom of the den. I mean, that's hardcore stuff, and it's just showing the seriousness of what they did. But again, Darius is basically saying, you do not make a fool of me and survive. So he's still a ruler. That's why we would kind of be like, I don't know. But he's at least recognizing the authority and power of God. But then look at the decree he makes. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. So he's got this big old empire, and he's sending out a mass mailing to everybody. And he says this, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, steadfast forever. His kingdom is that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall even be unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth. He worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, and he hath power. He hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So we got 4 rulers. We got Daniel, starts out wise, stays wise. We got Nebuchadnezzar, starts out simple. He gets proud, he gets abased, comes out the other side wise. We got Belshazzar, starts out a fool. He knows better. He descends into being a scorner, and he gets destroyed for it. And then we've got Darius, who starts out just simple. Now, on a worldly scale, he's wise. He's running his kingdom wisely, but spiritually speaking, he's simple. He descends through his own foolishness, and he repents, and he ends up about as wise as could be expected in the situation. And all of this comes down to saying they recognize the glory of God, they recognize the power of God, they recognize the authority of God, and that's the difference. When God shows his power, you have the choice to say, I yield or I resist. That's the decision we have. God shows his power, and he says, submit or not. If we submit, it goes well for us. Doesn't mean we get delivered all the time. Hebrews 11, there's a whole lot of people who don't make it out. But there's also that level of scorner where you resist and you face the destruction. And so again, Daniel goes on. If you continue reading this, Daniel has some great stuff to say, but that is about all the time we have for tonight. So I wanted to open up for questions or comments as we kind of wrap up that little side narrative. because I just wanted to kind of look at these 4 characters and tie them into some of the stuff we've been describing as we went along. So, questions or comments tonight as we close out? Peter?
Yeah, it's more an observation, really. I'm just thinking how the king must have felt throughout that night prior to going to see if Daniel had survived. But I wonder if his faith in our Lord was really confirmed when that stone was rolled away and Daniel was actually alive.
Yeah.
I really feel that his faith was probably a bit wobbly throughout the night, and confirmed when he saw Daniel in the morning and spoke to Daniel. But I think sometimes, like us all, we need that element of proof before we will really commit to faith,
Yeah. And that's why, if you remember last week we were talking, I think one of the great weaknesses, and it's why God repeats himself so many times in the Old Testament. The Israelites kept struggling with, what have you done for me lately? Like, it's astounding. You go through the wilderness wandering, and what does God have to keep doing? Another miracle, another miracle, another miracle, another miracle. And it's like, how many does it take to convince you? And it's almost like some of these pagan kings are more quickly convinced than the ones who've seen it done. And again, the application really, really quickly comes home to roost, where we're like, yeah, that's me. Because again, how often does our faith shake when we're in that dark spot going, what do I do? I don't know what to do here. And it's, God's delivered us 46 times. But what have you done for me lately? And that's the attitude we come with. So yeah, I appreciate Darius. I mean, he puts up with that. I mean, he knows exactly the source to go to. He knows exactly that he hopes God will deliver. He knows if there is a deliverance, it's going to come through God. And then I think God says, I'll show you. I'll show you a cool thing. And then Darius sends out that letter that basically says, we are all going to worship this guy. I think that's a fascinating look. Other questions? Slavik?
It occurred to me that there are many parallels between story of Daniel and story of Jesus, how they both got condemned. In both cases, there was a group of people who played the key person who made the final decision to make a bad decision. And in both cases, that key person unwillingly but still condemned them to death.
Yeah.
And in both cases, Daniel and Jesus willingly were ready to accept the death.
Yeah. There, and Ryan might know more about this than I do, because I know you've done a lot with the Jewish ministry. I had a friend who's a historian, and he pointed out that even Joseph, there's a lot of similarities between Joseph as well. And so it's almost like there's several characters in the Old Testament that are almost prototypes of Christ, who are falsely accused, who are thrown in jail, their life is on, and there's a lot of, so that my friend was telling me Joseph was looked at as almost a messianic figure in some cases because of some of the stuff he went through. And so it reminds me of Daniel and Ryan, I don't know if you've studied out any of that stuff too, or if you have anything to add on that front. But.
God purposely set it up that way. So like if you look at the setting of the tabernacle, the setting of the temple, how they left Egypt, there's always a reason why God always refers to them leaving Egypt with Moses. How Joseph saved Israel from the famine, and not just Israel, the rest of the world, because they were a world power back then. God set it up that purposely, so because the Jewish people will always look for a sign.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they kept asking Jesus, show us a sign, show us a sign. So show us a sign. And there was even at one point where he's like, no, I'm done showing you.
Yeah.
I've shown you. I mean, we don't have everything written down that Jesus did.
Mm-hmm.
God only gave us enough for us to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find it interesting that he says, no sign will be given you but the sign of Jonah. Yeah. So that again, so you'll see this story repeat: Joseph, Daniel, et cetera, all the way up to Jesus. Jesus is kind of the perfect fulfillment of it all. Slavik, I don't know if you had a follow up on any of that or if that satisfied. Okay, Leo.
This is just a thought, but I was thinking, do you think God counted it as his righteousness and he gets saved? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Because, I mean, the main time we see that phrase is with Abraham believing what God promised him. Abraham believed God and it was counted to him for righteousness. I don't know. It isn't that I forget who I was talking to at the end of the service last week, but they asked that question about Nebuchadnezzar. Like, do you believe Nebuchadnezzar was saved? I do. I think there was some genuine saving faith there. I don't know if Darius was just adding the God of Israel to his repertoire, like he's like the best God to serve, or if this was like a, an exclusive thing. I mean, he's clearly praising God in a way that seems elevating him at least above the other gods, if not replacing. But yeah, I just don't know. Any other questions or comments or follow-ups? Those are all good observations. How old was Daniel? Yeah. I don't know for sure. He probably would be a bit older because he went through the whole reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And then Nebuchadnezzar's son took the throne for a little while, but there was kind of a co-regency, with the grandson. And I'm not sure exactly how many years that was, but I mean, Nebuchadnezzar went through the 7 years of being insane. So you're fast forward. I mean, there's quite a bit of time that passes between when Daniel's captured and when Nebuchadnezzar's no longer there. And then there's a little bit longer between when Belshazzar is done. And then we don't know how much time passed between Darius coming on the scene and this. He served under, I mean, he was pretty old by the time he died, but I don't know exactly where. I don't know if anyone else has researched that one and can. Yeah, right. Ryan Stake is old. I get the impression he's pretty old. I just can't tell you exact.
Yeah, so.
Right. Yeah.
So by then his faith was soaring, like on fire. Like it was like so strong. Like.
Yeah. And so Daniel.
After all he went through.
Yeah, Daniel, I mean, we're just seeing these little snippets of Daniel's life. And he's just showed, but he's consistently faithful at the end of his life the exact same way he was at the beginning. So if you look at how he acted with the meat and the food that he wasn't supposed to eat, he was still probably a teenager or a young adult then. And he acted exactly the same way in the same, it's almost like a mirror image of how he acts under Darius.
I thought your faith does grow.
Oh yeah, I mean it no doubt grew, but you can see his actions, and we don't get to pull back like his brain and see what he's thinking. So maybe he had like a lot more confidence later on, but the point we see is his actions are exactly the same at the beginning and end. And he has a great impact on his friends right there in the middle with the burning. So it's every time you see a narrative with Daniel, he's acting exactly the same way. He doesn't have this compromised, wishy-washy character. He's held up as a paragon. Mike? Oh. Yeah. Wow. It could be. A play I saw once at Sight and Sound Theater had him as an it's as trustworthy as AI, I guess. But yeah, okay, so he's old. And because he did, he lived under 4 different kings, so that was quite a span of time. Mike, did you have the mic?
Just an observation that throughout the history of the Israeli kingdoms, all the way from even Abraham and the judges and all the way through, we often talk about this cycle of, well, we really believe we're going to do good, and then everything's fine, and then they descend into the valley, and they're completely disobedient, et cetera, et cetera. And just an observation that now the Hebrew people have been taken into captivity, and the kings that they live on are in the same cycle. You know, we have
Yeah.
a really good foreign king. Now we have a really bad foreign king. Then you kind of
Yeah.
get a good foreign king. Now you get another bad one, and that continues all the way up to Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, with the leadership that they had in their own faith and everything else.
Yeah.
So I think the lesson, if I were to suppose that there is a lesson, you really can't depend on worldly leadership.
Yeah, and
know?
and that's what a lot of this is pointing to, is the religious leaders you look at, the political leaders you look at, any of it. It's none of them are perfect. They all fail. And then as you get to like the book of Hebrews, it keeps accentuating the fact that Christ is that high priest who will never, his kingdom, his priesthood will never end. He's a king that will never stop being, like, you don't have to worry about him being a really effective leader and then he dies and the next guy becomes a Belshazzar. You know, and so I think that's a good observation there. All right, we're gonna wrap it unless there's any other final comments or follow-ups here. All right, Dave Hedger, if I can get you to close us out in prayer.
Dear Father, we thank you for Daniel and the example he was to all of us, his faith in you. I pray, Lord, that we would have an excellent spirit like Daniel, Lord, that we would serve you faithfully. And bless our church, we pray, and give Pastor Mike wisdom as he leads us. And we ask these things, Jesus, in your precious name.